Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave.
On behalf of every father and every mother.
Wings for freedom. On behalf of our
Warriors. And paves the way for a new history.
Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines to discuss the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We've got a great show for you this week. A lot going on. We'll do our best to cover it all, but gee whiz, there's a lot of stuff to talk about this week. So if you could, please do hit the like button. Please subscribe. And we, of course, have our social media on Twitter and Blue Sky, so you can check us out there. Colby did a really good post this week, and I know we reposted it. So if you aren't following Colby already, which I think you should be, then you would have caught it when we reposted it on the Tochnyi social media accounts. So always good to follow us there. We post updates and stuff. And of course, we have our website, tochnyi.info, our greatest achievement. It's where we keep all of our research and excellent articles that are published. We recently published an article from some of our excellent researchers that covers the Ukrainian campaign to take out air defense and radars. And it has an interactive map that's really cool. So I highly recommend you go check out tochnyi.info. Great source of information. And if you want to know more about what we talk about here, I think it's a good place to look. Chat, we always appreciate your feedback and your discussion and your questions. So if you do have any questions, we'll have a Q&A portion at the end. So feel free to post any questions that you have during the broadcast. First, I'll present the news. That'll be followed by Stanimir's update in Russia. Then we'll talk about a bunch of other topics, and then we'll get to Q&A. So without any further delay, I will now present the news. These are the main headlines as of March 29th, 2026. First up, we have operations. Ukrainian forces struck a Russian military icebreaker docked at the Baltic seaport of Vyborg during a large-scale overnight drone offensive, according to the General Staff, which recorded the incident on March 25th. The strike marked the first confirmed successful hit on a Russian military vessel in the Baltic Sea, carried out from nearly 1,000 kilometers away. The vessel, which is a patrol icebreaker called the Pruga, is operated by the Border Guard Division of Russia's FSB security service and was moored at the city's shipyard at the time of the attack. Images that appeared on Telegram the following day, purportedly from the scene, showed a white ship lying on its side among larger vessels in the port. The Pruga belongs to a ship class constructed at the same shipyard, designated Project 23550, which is designed to function as both an icebreaker and a conventional military warship. Russian maritime media has reported that a vessel of this type carries a price tag of roughly 18 billion rubles, equivalent to around $222 million. The strike was part of a broader Ukrainian drone campaign targeting Russian territory that night. Russia's defense ministry reported that 389 Ukrainian drones were intercepted across 13 Russian regions, along with some strikes over occupied Crimea. Vyborg is a historic port city situated in the northern part of Russia's Leningrad Oblast. Ukrainian FP-1 kamikaze drones struck the Yaroslav oil refinery overnight on March 28th, triggering a large fire at the site, as reported by the Cyberbaroshna community. A drone alert was issued across the region at 2 a.m., after which local residents began sharing footage online of the drones passing overhead, followed by video of the impact at the refinery. Russian authorities did not acknowledge the strike on the facility. The regional governor wrote on Telegram that the attack had caused damage to several residential buildings and a commercial property, but offered no explanation for the substantial fire burning at the refinery. Firm satellite data recorded abnormally elevated temperatures at the site, with monitoring showing the fire igniting at 2:54 a.m. and spreading to cover a considerable portion of the industrial zone. The Yaroslav refinery produces a broad range of petroleum products, including automotive gasoline, jet fuel, and lubricants. Its customer base includes virtually all major enterprises across Russia's central and northwestern regions, as well as airports, the Northern Railway Administration, and facilities tied to the country's defense manufacturing sector. The plant has a processing capacity of between 13 and 15 million tons of crude oil per year. Ukrainian Defense Forces carried out a missile strike on the explosives manufacturing plant operated by JSC Promsyntez in the city of Chapayevsk in Russia's Samara region on the morning of March 28th. The missile successfully bypassed Russian air defense systems and hit the facility, with footage recorded by local residents confirming the strike and the resulting explosion in the area of the plant where the explosives are produced. Chapayevsk lies approximately 900 kilometers from Ukraine's state border. Since the launches did not originate from the border zone, the missile's actual travel distance exceeded 1,000 kilometers. Promsyntez manufactures industrial explosives, including ammonite, ammonite, granulite, and TNT blocks, supplying both the mining and metallurgical industries and the defense sector, where its products are mostly used in the production of aerial bombs, artillery shells, and missiles. This was not the facility's first time being struck. In April of 2025, Ukraine's security service conducted a drone attack on the same plant, during which at least 20 blasts and multiple fires were recorded, forcing management to suspend all production. The weapon used in the March 28th strike was the FP-5 Flamingo missile, developed by the manufacturer Firepoint. The missile was first shown to journalists in August of 2025, at which point it was confirmed to already be in serial production. The Flamingo carries a warhead weighing 1,150 kilograms, has a stated range exceeding 3,000 kilometers, and travels at a maximum speed of 950 kilometers per hour. It features a fiberglass composite airframe with built-in resistance to Russian electronic warfare systems. Ukrainian forces began deploying the Flamingo in limited numbers against targets inside Russia, with the first confirmed use occurring on August 30, 2025, when an FSB outpost and patrol vessels near Armyansk in Crimea were struck. Up next, we have economy and aid. The UK government has announced an urgent additional £100 million in funding to reinforce Ukraine's air defense capabilities against ongoing Russian aerial attacks. The money is to be deployed immediately towards strengthening air defense systems, protecting both frontline forces and critical infrastructure. The announcement brings total UK commitments to Ukrainian air defense over the past 2 months to £600 million. The package was unveiled at a meeting of the Joint Expeditionary Force leaders in Helsinki, where discussions centered on maximizing support for Ukraine. The Prime Minister stated his determination to do everything possible to support a sovereign Ukraine for future generations, and made it clear there would be no reduction in British support while the Russian attacks continue. The Defense Secretary confirmed the funding will enhance air defense capabilities to protect civilians, cities, and essential facilities, and noted that the growing alignment between Russia and Iran makes it increasingly important to build on Ukrainian expertise and innovation with the backing of British industry. Canada announced a new round of sanctions against Russia's shadow fleet on March 26th, adding 100 oil tankers to the sanctions list. The foreign minister made the announcement, stating that the measures are designed to erode Russia's capacity to fund its war against Ukraine by going after vessels used to move Russian oil and goods in circumvention of existing restrictions. The foreign minister said that Canada remains firmly committed to Ukraine's sovereignty and people, and that Ottawa will continue intensifying sanctions pressure in coordination with allies until Russia ends the war. With this latest addition, Canada has now sanctioned more than 600 vessels involved in transporting goods on Russia's behalf. The move follows a previous sanctions package unveiled on February 24th, the 4th anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion, which also covered 100 Shadow Fleet ships. President Zelensky welcomed the announcement, describing the measures as important and well-timed. He also thanked the United Kingdom, which on March 25th announced that its armed forces and law enforcement personnel would be granted authority to board Russian Shadow Fleet vessels operating in British waters. European Union imports of Russian fertilizers reached €1.7 billion in 2025, a 14% increase compared to pre-invasion levels. Fish and seafood imports from Russia rose by 25% to $739 million over the same period. Russia's state nuclear corporation Rosatom continues to operate without EU sanctions and supplies approximately 30% of Europe's uranium needs. A fertilizer analyst at S&P Global Commodity Insights noted that trade volumes are expected to remain stable as long as sanctions are not applied, and that Russia has not lost any of its global fertilizer market share since 2022. The United States, despite maintaining some of the most stringent sanctions on Russian energy, has continued substantial purchases in other categories. American buyers spent nearly $1 billion on Russian fertilizers in the first half of 2025 alone, alongside $755 million on uranium and plutonium and $600 million on palladium, a metal critical to automotive catalytic converters in which Russia holds a dominant position in global supply. The Trump administration's decision to suspend oil sanctions due to the shortage in the global market added up to $150 million per day in additional revenue for Moscow. The European Commission is currently finalizing a 20th sanctions package valued at €570 million, targeting metals, chemicals, and minerals. For the first time, the package may include ammonia, a key building block for nitrogen fertilizers that had previously been excluded from restrictions due to food security concerns. The chief economist at Germany's Landesbank Baden-Württemberg, sorry for the pronunciation, Gao, assessed that Russia's economy is stagnating and that business confidence is deteriorating, with the Kremlin aware of its vulnerabilities. He argued that Washington should pass the Graham-Blumenthal Act, which would impose steep tariffs on any country purchasing Russian oil or gas, and that coordinated action between the US and EU could significantly diminish Russia's ability to finance the war. Up next, we have international relations. Ukraine and Saudi Arabia have signed a defense cooperation agreement between their respective defense ministries, announced by the president of Ukraine ahead of his meeting with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. The agreement is intended to lay the groundwork for future contracts, technological collaboration, and investment, while also reinforcing Ukraine's role as an international security provider. President Zelensky stated that Ukraine is prepared to share its expertise and technologies with Saudi Arabia as part of an effort to strengthen the protection of human life. He drew a parallel between the drone and ballistic missile attacks Ukraine has faced throughout the war and similar strikes being carried out by Iran across the Middle East and Gulf region, framing the cooperation as mutually beneficial given that Saudi Arabia also possesses capabilities of interest to Ukraine. During the meetings, the two sides discussed the situation in the Middle East and the Gulf region, Russia's backing of the Iranian regime, fuel markets, and potential energy cooperation. Zelensky arrived in Saudi Arabia a day prior to the signing. While there, he also met with Ukrainian military experts based in the country to discuss the kingdom's key air defense requirements. Ukraine's cabinet of ministers have formally invalidated 116 international agreements previously concluded with Russia, Belarus, and with the Commonwealth of Independent States framework. The move was announced by the foreign minister, who stated that Ukraine's legal and treaty framework must reflect the realities of the current war and the emerging security architecture taking shape across Europe. The terminations were carried out on March 25th at the initiative of the Foreign Ministry. Of the 116 agreements, 25 are being terminated outright, 3 are being formally denounced, and 88 involve Ukraine's withdrawal from existing treaties. 5 of the total agreements involve Russia, 23 involve Belarus, and 87 fall within the CIS framework, and 1 is a trilateral agreement between Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus. The foreign minister indicated that this step, taken together with presidential decrees issued on February 25th, covering Ukraine's withdrawal from 31 CIS-related agreements and 14 draft laws registered in the Rada that would terminate a further 74 agreements, effectively completes the main phase of realigning Ukraine's bilateral and multilateral legal relationships with Russia, Belarus, and the CIS to match the country's current circumstances and its role in Europe's new security landscape. And last item this week, the European Union has frozen approximately 16 billion euros in rearmament loans earmarked for Hungary under the SAFE program in response to Hungary's ongoing blockage of a 90 billion euro loan for Ukraine. On March 25th, the European Commission approved defense spending plans under the SAFE program for France and the Czech Republic, leaving Hungary as the only country among the 19 that have expressed interest in the mechanism and whose plans remain unapproved. A diplomat explained that it is difficult for the Commission to approve billions for Hungary while the country is violating the principle of loyal cooperation by blocking funds for a nation at war. Hungary has shown a strong interest in accessing SAFE funds and has pushed for more than €1 billion above what the EU has proposed, with the EU's offer standing at approximately €16.2 billion. A European Commission spokesperson indicated separately that Hungary's loan plan is still under review and must be approved once that process concludes. The Hungarian Prime Minister stated on March 19th that he would not support any decision favorable to Ukraine until Kyiv resumes the transit of Russian oil through the Druzhba pipeline. The SAFE, or Security Action for Europe program, provides preferential financing for EU member states to procure weapons for their armed forces, with priority given to European manufactured equipment. Its uptake has been driven by the desire of European countries to rapidly build up their own defense capabilities in light of the new security environment. And that's it for the main headlines this week. We'll now move to the next segment. Okay, so now we move to Russia, where a lot has been happening. Stanimir, we got a long list of topics to discuss, so we'll just jump right into it. I think the first thing you want to discuss is there's been a few developments in the current suspected foot and mouth disease epidemic that's currently plaguing Russian livestock. So if you want to discuss that a little bit, maybe give our audience some context.
Yes, so there is an epidemic currently in Russia with the authorities refusing to state what exactly is the source of the epidemic in terms of a disease. I think the common explanation was I'm forgetting the name, pasteurellosis. It's a common disease that's curable by antibiotics, and it almost never involves killing of the animals. Hence why it's very strange that they're just killing animals outright. And what happened this week is they are videos of them washing the tires of vehicles that are leaving the areas where the animals are being killed. This is something that would lead you to believe that this is an outbreak of foot and mouth disease, despite the authorities not actually saying that. And the other thing that we learned is that the animals are being killed without being sedated fully, because access to such medication is limited, as these are being produced in Europe and Western countries, and Russia simply doesn't have enough of those. So basically, they're killing animals while they're fully conscious of of what is happening to them. If you like animals, don't look at that if you find videos. But yeah, that's what's happening. They're basically torturing animals to death. And today there was a protest in Novosibirsk. However, some of the leaders of the protests were arrested. And also to disrupt the protest, they sent specialized machinery to clear the snow there, as Novosibirsk parks are full of snow because it hasn't been fully cleared. And this was an attempt to disrupt the rally. I don't think it succeeded, but it was also a small rally given the size that is allowed in Russia. And also on the news of the Russian farmer who tried to set himself aflame to protect his animals, they waited for him to go to the prosecution's office in Novosibirsk to file a complaint. And then they went in with police and veterinary services and killed all his animals, which were, I think, the last remaining in that village. So on top of that, what has happened is that Belarus, on top of Kazakhstan, has also banned the import of animals from Russia, especially beef, as well as Kazakhstan has banned the import of feed and other livestock products. And the worry is now that more and more regions are being affected and taking the same measures, which means that if it's indeed a foot and mouth disease outbreak, it's spreading and the Russian government can't control it without actually imposing a full quarantine and coming out public that this is happening, which would kill their exports of agricultural products almost completely. I think they were valued at $45 billion in 2025. Now, the reason it's spreading is because of the theory that there has been a low-quality vaccine distributed against foot and mouth disease, and that's why they can't prevent it in animals. And the final story from this week is that the USDA also issued a warning that the most probable cause of this outbreak isn't what they're claiming, but it's actually foot and mouth disease. And that's why you should limit purchases of livestock products and feed from Russia.
Yeah, so I think over the last week, it's become pretty clear that it appears to be an outbreak of foot and mouth disease. Like all the evidence points towards that, regardless of what the Russian authorities are willing to admit or not. And as he said, it's going to be pretty disastrous for Russian livestock exports.
And also other agricultural exports, but yes, livestock exports especially. They don't export much beef, but they do export a lot of poultry and pork. Pork will be hit directly.
Yep. So we'll keep following that, but it's definitely a terrible thing for all of the small-time Russian farmers that are currently having all their livestock slaughtered. Then the next topic is the Russian. The Russians are looking for extra money in the couch cushions to fund the war, I think is like the topic name. There's sort of two subtopics here. The first is that Russia has canceled some cuts to their budget because of the windfall they've gotten due to the increased prices for energy resources like oil and natural gas. And then the other thing is that this week, Putin had a meeting with some of the most wealthy oligarchs in the country and effectively hit them up for extra money to fund the war effort. So do you want to talk a little bit about those two initiatives, Stanimir?
So yeah, the first initiative, we learned about it a while ago, that they want to cut non-essential spending by 10% in the budget. I think for now it's postponed because of the windfall they're expecting from oil and gas, because that hasn't actually materialized, because the way Russian oil and gas taxes work is that you pay tax when you extract the oil. that's the mineral tax, and then when you ship it, that's the duty on the export of these energy resources. As the ships are still traveling or haven't arrived yet, and their shipping was prior to March 12th or 15th, I think currently they don't get that much of a windfall, but they're expecting a lot of a windfall. So that's why they postponed the idea of cutting by 10%. But according to Russian Finance Minister Siluanov, it's still on the table, and they still want to consider what to cut in the budget to actually improve the situation. As for the second part, there was a meeting indeed of Putin and the top oligarchs of Russia, including some people that recently had their sanctions lifted for claiming in German court that they're not connected to Putin and they don't directly communicate with him. So maybe that should be reviewed for that specific oligarch who is known for his legal enterprises inside Germany. But yes, in the meeting, first it was Suleiman Kerimov who proposed that they send 100 billion rubles to the Russian budget. So that's over $1 billion and over 1 billion euros as well by a bit. He was then followed up by Deripaska, who said that he would also provide the budget with 100 billion. He's well known with being the owner of Rusal. And then Vladimir Putanin, who is the head and owner of Norilsk Nickel, said that he would provide 100 billion rubles plus a 30 billion rubles on top to outdo the other two, at which point Kerimov raised his sum to 200 billion rubles. So this is not a trivial amount of money that they're going to get if these promises held up, and I'm expecting that they hold up to that point of the bargain, because you don't want to anger Putin by making a promise and not following through. And for some people, this is close to 20% of their net worth. For Kerimov or specifically, I think in 2025 he was worth around $10 billion. Now he might be worth closer to 20 billion, but back then it was around 20% of his net worth. And the idea is that this will be extra money that's going to be sent to the government. The claim is to improve business conditions, but most likely it's going to go directly to the war to further attempt to expand the scope of the war and the war production, or to just maintain it at previous levels. The other thing that they're considering is an extra tax on extra profits for companies. They did it once during the last 4 years. They're considering doing it again for large businesses. However, I have to point out that when you look at the situation in 2026, these businesses are not posting profits, so they don't have a record profit like in 2023 that you can tax.
Okay, so I think the kind of general takeaways are, for now, the oil shortage in the global market hasn't actually given the Russians any improvement to their financial situation. It's mostly solved, I guess you'd call it a storage problem, like they're pumping all this oil and they don't have any place to put it. They'll have to shut down production and all that, but this has kind of bailed them out of that crisis. But they're betting on the fact that this global oil shortage and energy shortage, I guess you call it, will last a long time, or a decent amount of time, and that this will be able to help their budget. So they've now formally bet on that possibility for the budget. And then I think the other thing is just that, like I've heard Russian oligarchs referred to as human wallets for the regime or for the government. I think that seems to be what we're seeing on display here, is that you're only allowed to be an oligarch in the Russian system if you're loyal to the regime. And this is maybe either a loyalty test or just them kind of coming to get their money back. And these guys are following. It sounds like they're pledging a not insubstantial amount of their fortunes to the state. So yeah, I think that's it for that stuff. Yes, Stanimir?
Yeah, and I have to say that they've shown in the last few years that if you don't cooperate, or even if you fall out of favor, or you no longer have some support backing you, or krysha, as they say in Russia, a roof over you, they can easily just nationalize your company and empty its accounts. And they've done it and we're going to talk about that a bit in the next segment.
Yep. So I guess real quick, I didn't have this on the docket, but maybe we should do a quick update on the internet situation. I think it's still a bit confusing, but as far as I understand, the Russians or the government has caved a little bit, and they've set up mobile internet in certain specific public areas. There's been some talk, which was kind of your theory about what's going on, which is there's been some art. I saw a Medusa article that basically the security services are going, full bore on these restrictions, and lots and lots of other factions in Russia are quite upset about them because it hurts the economy and all kinds of other government services and all kinds of things. So, members of the Duma have protested and so forth, but the security services are pretty adamant that this is a necessary measure to prevent drone attacks and things like that. And other shenanigans in the two biggest cities, Moscow and St. Petersburg. So if you have any kind of updates or thoughts on that.
Yeah, one of the things that happened was that they lifted the restrictions, or they minimized the jamming or the restrictions imposed on telecoms around the big metro stations in Moscow. So because that was causing a lot of issues for Muscovites, as they're used to using the metro, and they're used to operating cashless, and everything was working with mobile internet there. So I think that's why they caved in, and also it was becoming a big problem on Russian social media, or what's left of it, in regards to the restrictions being too draconian without any signs of actually there being danger for the locations where they're being done. So that's why they caved in a little. Also, what they expect is as part of this communication ban, they tried to have a rally today in multiple cities in Russia, sort of a protest against the internet restrictions. But the organizers of these protests were initially given the go-ahead to have a state-sanctioned protest, but then they started arresting them. And by today, I think most were arrested or even put in insane asylums. And the attempt to hold a rally was completely banned. There's already a Russian organization a voluntary organization linked with protests against the banning of mobile internet and the restrictions on messengers. That's called the Red or Crimson Swan. It even has a logo with the Russian flag, the official Russian flag. That didn't help them. I think the orders came from above that any form of protest would be seen as a weakness. So they basically destroyed that organization in its infancy, blocked all the rallies. There was riot police deployed in the center of Moscow expecting a protest. And on top of that, we know that they're saying that they're going to unblock Telegram probably. That's a new story from today. The expectation is that the management, so Durov, the management of Telegram, with high probability, they said, would accept all Russian demands. I don't see that happening, because that would mean he would put a target on himself for the rest of the world, given what those demands are. And I expect this is just to be a way to calm the public a bit. But yeah, the expectation now is that they're going to lift the bans on Telegram, and it's going to be fully operational inside Russia. But I don't think it will return to the status it had, and I don't think it will be as used by the Russian security services, basically the military, as much as it used to be, because there are restrictions there. And even with the lifting of the ban on mobile internet, Wi-Fi traffic in Moscow increased 4 times since the start of March. The traffic on public Wi-Fi networks increased 3.5 times. And Russians are now moving to a cash society back to the 2000s and the 90s. And they're also really segregating themselves in terms of what they can protest and what they can't, and what kind of civil organizations they can join and what they can't. given what's happening the last few weeks.
Yep. So I think we'll keep monitoring the internet situation in Russia. But yeah, it's continues to develop. Then I believe, Stanimir, for a little while, we wanted to talk a little bit about the HIV epidemic in Russia, or SPED. For some reason, I remember that in my, my Russian class of all things.
Speed.
Speed, yeah, it's SPED in Russian. That's what they call HIV. Yeah, I think this is something you want to talk about for a little while. So I think now's as good a time as any. We might as well get into it. So if you want to talk about this epidemic that's currently happening in Russia.
Yeah, the epidemic has been ongoing since the 90s, but the thing that is making it worse recently is the war. And if you look at the people who are coming out of the prisons and joining the Russian army, and how medical supplies are being handled by the Russian army, you would see a lot of causes for infection by infectious diseases, not just HIV, but also hepatitis. Because of the way that people were interacting and the limited medical supplies, and also the lack of medication to fight these diseases. Right now, Russian soldiers are signing up with the army, going there to the front without any of these diseases and coming back and infecting their entire family. So you would have people coming back to their wives, and then in a couple of months, the wife realizes she has HIV now because of her husband. This is not entirely linked to prostitution in the border areas or in the occupied territories. It's linked also to the lack of medication, the lack of testing, the usage of the same needles for multiple patients that are being treated by Russian medics. And it's growing. And the biggest problem here is that you don't have statistics officially for it and how much it's growing, because people aren't getting tested and they're just dying after they've passed on the disease. And it didn't used to be like that. When it came to prisoners who were more likely to be infected, when Prigozhin was organizing prisoners in his own groups, they had a separate unit for those who were infected by such diseases. They would get medication for treatment, so they would not be able to infect people if they had HIV. The virus retreats to other parts of the body where the medication can't reach it, but also it's outside of the blood. So you can basically be as completely healthy as anyone in terms of how infectious you are. And he was providing medication for the troops that were under his command. And the penalty for lying about your HIV status in Prigozhin's troops was death. So no one lied about it. They had separate battalions. They had the treatment, and the treatment in Russia isn't that expensive because Russia makes generics of the treatment, even though it's an earlier generation, but they make generics of the treatment for HIV, and you can easily get it in stores. Or if you can't get it from Russia, you can get it from India to buy it, but there's also HIV centers in every region in Russia, and you can sign up there and you get free meds from there. This is not something that's happening under the Russian army. Things have deteriorated from what it was under Prigozhin, and the army is rapidly being, at least the lower ranks are being fully infected from all these diseases, and they're finding out when they come home or when they go to a hospital for any reason that they've been infected. People who are recruited from prisons who have HIV are denied their treatment. So they go into full-on AIDS. And this is an example of how little the Russian army cares for its soldiers, because they don't care if they die storming the front or if they die from AIDS. It's the same for them either way. But the problem is the healthy soldiers are getting infected, and a large portion of them are coming back to Russia and reinfecting other people. And this is probably something that's going to push Russia to be, in terms of severity, even more closer to the top of the ranking of countries in terms of the percentage of the population that has HIV, because it's reached a point where it's in the general population now, with over 1% of women being infected.
Yeah, so I think it points to the broader kind of securitization of logic in the Russian state, where we're seeing, with this epidemic, with the livestock, with the other topics we've talked about with the internet outage. The people who are in charge of the country's security, the internal security services, have a mandate, which they've been given almost unlimited authority, and they're not really incentivized to protect against these other factors like health or like people having mobile internet and things like that. So we're seeing the security services kind of go all in on these things and just kind of try to cover up or hand wave any problems that are the result. And by maximizing the need for the security stuff, they're creating all kinds of second order effects that are resulting in these broader problems. And I think they're really going to start affecting Russia's bottom line. I'd say sooner rather than later. Okay, so I think the last topic is the floods in Dagestan. So this is a pretty significant set of natural disasters that have occurred in this region. And yeah, Dagestan is in the Caucasus, which is, the southern part of Russia, kind of near Turkey, Azerbaijan, that kind of area. And yeah, there's some pretty bad flooding. So Stanimir, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, so we have some videos we can show, but the flood in Dagestan is considered to be the worst in the last 100 years. It's already left 320,000 people without electricity, and there are entire bridges being washed away. There are the entire streets being washed away, cars, homes, everything is being washed away in certain parts. Railway traffic has even stopped in a part of the country region because of bridges being washed away. There's also a flood in Chechnya to a lesser degree. However, the thing is that so far, no people have been reported dead or injured to that extent. No people have been reported dead, but there have been multiple injuries in the dozens. And there is also an emergency in both Dagestan and Chechnya. But yeah, it's a considerable flood and it's impacting people's lives. I don't think it's over. It's not going to be over for the next few days. And you can see one of the major railway bridges in the region has been washed away. This is a specific point where there are 3 railway bridges to provide extra throughput. And the first one has basically failed. We have entire streets being flooded as well in other videos, and people being dragged by the flood. But like I said, so far it hasn't been announced that anyone has died. And also here you can see that the Indiana Jones trick with the refrigerator seems to work in multiple cases, not just a nuclear explosion.
Oh, that's interesting. Have the authorities made any kind of formal statement about their plan to respond to this?
They've instituted a state of emergency. That's their go-to when it comes to flooding or other natural disasters. And under the state of emergency, there are funds that are going to be disbursed for people to recover from the flood. The only issue is that these funds aren't usually indexed with inflation, which has been going on for a while. So people are probably going to get a lot less than what they expect in terms of repairing their houses or recovering damaged property. But that's par for the course in Russia with the inflation the way it's going and the legislation lagging behind when it comes to public services.
Yeah, and I assume some of these bridges are decades old, right? So it's probably going to take a while to repair all that.
Yeah, it won't take a few metal plates for $500, that's for sure.
So yeah, I think that's all the topics I wanted to discuss with you, Stanimir. This has just been the special topics that we discuss. Of course, now we'll go to your general update on the Russian economy, which covers all manner of topics. So over to you, Stanimir. Stanimir?
Yes, sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. I want to start with Ust-Luga and Primorsk. These are 2 of the major Russian ports when it comes to exporting petroleum products. Ukraine has been hitting them in the last several days, and I want to point out that currently there's an imposed force majeure I think, on both these ports right now. For a while, on the 26th of March, I think Primorsk was open and a few tankers loaded some goods, but I think right now it's still on fire from the last attack. So I think it's still closed. When it comes to Ural oil, these export around 65% of all Ural oil shipped through Russia to the external market. So that's a significant portion. And combined, they also account for 40% of all Russian oil exports as a whole. If you want to ask where does the rest go, it goes to, when it comes to Ural, there are some other ports up north, but it also goes to the other two primary ports are in Novorossiysk, and there you have two major pipelines coming in, and one comes from Kazakhstan, which Russia uses at around 20% of it, and the other one comes from the rest of Russia, Novorossiysk, and that's where they export the rest of their oil. However, in the last few weeks, if you look at the number of tankers docking at Novorossiysk, you would see that the share of Ust-Luga and Primorsk has actually been higher than 40%, because those were underutilized. I think only 48,000 tons were shipped through Novosibirsk for not the previous week, but before that. And that was maybe just a few tankers. And I want to point out that they also export an even higher percentage of Russian diesel and gasoline when it comes to the external market. This is because you don't see, like with the SPO oil that's being exported through the eastern port of Kozmino and via pipeline to China, you don't see any or almost any products in terms of oil petroleum products being exported through the east, because the East generally has a deficiency in terms of refining capacity. So it doesn't refine enough fuel to sell it on the domestic market. But when it comes to how much Russian diesel was exported for the last few months, we have some data. So for the first 15 days of March, they exported 1.4 million tons via 29 ships. This is roughly 10.26 million barrels. So almost 0.7 million barrels per day in terms of diesel. And in February, they exported around 2.3 million tons for the whole of February. So around 16.86 million barrels. Again, not quite to a million barrels per day, but still close. And in January, they exported 24 million barrels of diesel. We have data for February in terms of gasoline. They exported 500,000 tons, or 3.67 million barrels. That's on top of the diesel they exported. And more than half of this was exported via the Baltic and the two ports, as Turkey and Africa in total received just 930,000 tons after the 2.3 million tons exported in February when it comes to diesel. Combined with gasoline, these two ports export something like 0.4 to 0.5 million barrels of fuel. This is just for diesel and gasoline alone. And we have an undisclosed amount of bunker fuel that's also being exported primarily through these ports, as Russia produces around 40 million tons a year of that. And when it comes to LNG exports, we have Ust-Luga Novatek terminal exporting 8 million tons per year. So if they stop operating for a month and a half, we'll be close to over 1 million tons of natural gas being exported. And this is a significant hit on the Russian oil sector, because it's one of their more secure ports when it comes to oil exports and oil products and LNG. And also it's going to contribute to well over half of their total oil and petroleum exports as a whole. And it's if Ukraine can hit this, it can hit even much easier the ports in the Black Sea, because there you can also employ sea drones, and you can have an even closer range to the ports in terms of the flight time of drones that reduces the amount of time the Russian air defense has to respond to these drone attacks. And they've already shown that they can knock out berths that are out at sea, as the ones in Novorossiysk. And when it comes to the damage, we know that the Novatek facility for LNG and gas processing is out of line. It's currently not operating, and I think it's currently actively on fire. Also, at least 3 berths have been hit and damaged when it comes to the Ust-Luga oil and oil products terminal. And operations have stopped for a while at Primorsk, even though, like I said, they managed to recover some of the loading capacity of that port and managed to load a few tankers in the meantime. Also, this has caused problems for the Russian domestic market when it comes to the oil and gasoline and petroleum products exports. The domestic fuel market, in terms of the independent gas stations, have limited their purchases and are no longer building up inventories because prices have gone up because of the huge demand abroad. And the current wholesale prices for gasoline and diesel mean that there's almost a zero margin for profit if you're an independent gas station after covering your cost to operate. And because of this, the independent gas stations have switched to buying smaller batches because they want to wait for the price to improve or not to buy a huge volume if the price is currently high. In connection to that, the Russian Deputy Prime Minister Novak announced that he had a meeting on the 27th of March with the major Russian oil companies, and they're going to ban fully the exports of gasoline from April 1st, 2026. And the other news we have is that the Russian oil taxes came in for March 2026. And as we talked earlier, these are going to be very low because they are set up based on the sale point of Russian oil in February. So that was trading at $44.59 on average, with the average exchange rate for the month being 76.85 rubles per dollar. So they came in at 1,000 rubles over the February taxes. So they came in at 8,000 rubles per ton versus 7,087 rubles per ton in February. And if you look at the comparison to 2025, they're 47.6% lower than in 2025. So in terms of revenue, at least for this month, the Russian budget is not getting enough when it comes to oil and gas, and it's probably going to be another month where they have to postpone the budget rule for selling currency if the oil sales come in short. We also have a final news story when it comes to Russian oil as a whole, that the Philippines, for the first time in 5 years, received a batch of Russian oil. It was a 100,000 ton shipment of ESP oil, which arrived in the Philippines on the afternoon of the 24th of March. This is significant because we're seeing a lot of countries that previously stopped purchasing Russian oil due to sanctions and other considerations now returning to it in light of the conflict in the Middle East. And when it comes to ESP oil, I don't think there is much Ukraine can do to sanction it because it's on the other side of Russia. Literally, it's too far away for drones. They probably have to do a very detailed and audacious operation to even touch that part of the exports. But from there, it's usually already being bought fully by China and Asian countries. We also had news for the bars and restaurants and catering as a whole in Russia. It's continuing to decline for the first 3 months of the year. When it comes to attendance, bars and restaurants in Moscow, which usually accounts for much of the country in terms of revenue for those establishments, attendance decreased by 12%. In St. Petersburg, it decreased by 8%, and for Russia as a whole by 3%. And we also had data that in March 2026, when it came to the number of establishments in Russian cities over 1 million, they decreased by 55% when compared to 2025. And the final part is that for the period from January to February 2026, the number of applications from entrepreneurs to open a new franchise for a restaurant or a fast food chain decreased by 47.5%. Depending on whose data you're looking at. This is from Businessman's Rule. When it comes to franchise rule, the decrease is 48%, but as a whole, the Russian catering business is cratering significantly. It's in a crisis. We also have news on 2 seizures by the Russian government. The accounts of the partially nationalized Yuzhurals Zloto were the seizure of them was lifted by the Moscow City Court. However, this already did significant damage to the company because it entered a technical default because it couldn't access its accounts. It had 42 billion rubles on them, but it couldn't access them, and it was forced to take out an expensive loan for 22.4 billion rubles, something it shouldn't do if it has 42 billion rubles on cash on hand. So they want to now privatize this company, but they've already done significant economic damage to it. So what they did is they lifted the seizure on the funds after the fact, and they're hoping to actually find a buyer. But I have to say, we've already seen an attempt to sell a previously nationalized company from the owner, from a previous governor of Chelyabinsk region. They seized his pasta-making company, Makfa, that also operated some major business centers. They tried to sell its business centers and shopping centers, and there were no buyers at that auction by the Russian government. The other nationalization that we had information about was seizing the hotels that are associated with Sirena Travel. The company's assets are estimated at 35 billion rubles, and I have to point out that this is because the company is linked to the developer of the ticket booking system, Leonardo, that all of Russian airlines use. And there was an outage of the Leonardo system, which caused the Russian government to go into a full-on security crisis. So they started looking for reasons to nationalize the company or nationalize companies linked to it. And this is what we've gotten to. The hotel business of the company has been nationalized, and they're trying to take away even other assets by the owners of the company that produces Leonardo. Because you can't fail just because you have a glitch in the system. It has to be something malicious against the state, and you get prosecuted because of that. When it comes to nitrate compounds, as Joseph mentioned, there have been attacks by the Ukrainian forces on these. When it comes to companies and plants producing nitrate compounds, since the start of 2026, 19 have been hit. And because of this, the Russian Farmers Union has asked the government to either put an export duty on fertilizers or to make a quota for domestic sales because they can't afford the current prices of fertilizers, which have gone up 40% since the start of the year. And soon after, there was a full ban on the export of ammonium nitrate from Russia, introduced by the Russian Ministry of Agriculture. And this is a sign that it's also hitting farmers, but it's likely also hitting their munitions production because these are compounds also used for the production of explosives. When it comes to Russian clothing, we have 2 big stories this week. 2 of Russia's largest clothing retailers are closing down a significant portion of their business. When it comes to the Concept Group stores, they're closing around 47% of all their stores in 2025, and they're down to out of 284, they closed 133, and then they're down to 151 stores. And in 2026, the company plans to close down another 19 stores. So well over half of the stores will be closed in a matter of 2 years. And the other major clothing producer and retailer, Glory Jeans, announced that in 2026, it plans to close between 150 and 200 of its stores. And if it started in 2023 with 683 stores, now it has just 574 stores. So they're closing anywhere between 25% of their stores to 45% of their stores. If you want to look at it as an analogy from Europe, that would be if Zara closed 1/4 of its stores in Europe. This is how big of a news story this is in Russia, but because of the economic situation, it's barely being covered. It's just another in the long list of bad business stories and sectors that are in crisis. We also had information from Izvestia on the Russian airlines and how they're doing in regards to airplane maintenance. When it comes to the mass-used older variants of the Boeing 737 and the Airbus A320, since 2022, S7 has managed to repair or partially repair 400 engines and extend the life of their aircraft by 8 to 10 years. This is significant because they can't find other engines and they can't find other aircraft currently because Russia is behind schedule on the production of domestic airplanes. And in terms of engines, these two types use engines that are used by 40% of the Russian fleet of imported planes. And the other company that started doing this, though I have less faith in their ability to repair engines, is Aeroflot. It has its own subsidiary that does the repair of engines for these two types. And both have been approved by the Russian Federal Air Transportation Agency. The other thing interesting is that Ural Airlines, which has a lot of old A320 variants, is planning on extending the service life of their fleet beyond 96,000 hours, which is causing some concern among Russian airline experts and airplane experts, because Airbus rates these planes for 90,000 hours in terms of service life. It did consider life extension programs above 120,000 hours, but I don't think they went anywhere as far as I checked with some of our experts. And outside of Russia, there's very limited interest in extending the service life of these planes because these are reaching an age that's over 30 years and usually should be retired. But this should show you how much faith Russian airlines have in the state companies providing enough domestically produced airplanes in the next few years. When it comes to planes such as Airbus A330, Boeing 777, and Boeing 787, their engines can be serviced in Russia, and some attempts to service the engines of the older ones of these planes in Iran have completely failed thus far, with losses of engines now that there is an ongoing conflict, essentially. And the state of Russian airlines is that they're being forced to self-repair Western engines, at least to some degree, so they can continue to operate because the domestically produced planes are not going to come, I think, until the end of 2027. At least that's what the expectation is, for them to be certified by then. We also had news from KAMAZ. It's going to return to a 4-day working week from June 1st, 2026. This is also going to coincide with the second week of May 2026, which, because of Russian holidays, is going to be just a 4-day work week. And they're doing this because the medium track market decreased by 30% and the heavy track segment by 33%. While the decrease in sales in those two markets hasn't been that bad for KAMAZ, they still dropped by 14% in the medium track market and by 11% in the heavy track market. And senior management is saying that this is an effort to bring the company back from the abyss. Things are that bad. For 2025, the company reported a 47 billion ruble loss, so that's almost $500 million. But it was saved by 72.6 billion ruble subsidy from the state. That's close to $1 billion in terms of a subsidy. And its debt rose by 90% in 2025 to 269 billion rubles. And debt servicing rose by 6.25% to 45 billion rubles, so close to the entire loss the company made. And on top of that, as soon as they managed to pay off a 14.5 billion ruble loan in early 2026, they immediately took out a 27 billion loan from a bank with high interest. So their debt costs are only growing, and the company also came out today, not today, but on Friday, saying it doesn't expect to be profitable in 2026 either. If if there's a continuation in the decline of sales for the rest of the year, I am expecting the loss to widen even further, and for them to ask for their government subsidy to even double, because they can't handle it. They can't handle their economic situation currently. Part of the reason for this decrease in sales is not just that the Russian transportation market is suffering because of the economic downturn, but also because the Russian Ministry of Defense has reduced purchases from KAMAZ. It used to buy around 1/3 of its production, and now it's buying less in terms of the number of produced vehicles. So that's a big problem for them. Now, when it comes to commodities, we have grains first. So we have some good news for Russia, not so good for the rest of the world, but it managed to export 1.1 million tons of peas to China from July 2025 to the middle of March 2026. This is a 150% increase compared to the previous harvest season. And right now, 76% of all Russian pea exports are being directed towards China. This is usually unusual for China because often it tries to have multiple producers buy from them, to have multiple producers as places to source goods for its agricultural needs. I want to point out that when it comes to Russia, one of the big problems for Russia has been that China refuses to buy Russian wheat. And so Russia is forced to seek buyers elsewhere. And this is continuing to be a Chinese policy, but for other agricultural products, they have lifted their partial restrictions, or companies have started to purchase more and more often from Russia. We also have the exports of wheat for the first 20 days of March. They also grew considerably, this time due to the improvement of the exchange rate when it comes to the weaker ruble for the last few weeks, and also due to the conflict in the Middle East. They rose by 170% compared to 2025, reaching 3.1 million tons. When it comes to grain as a whole, it increased by 200% to 3.5 million tons. However, the final story when it comes to Russian agriculture isn't that great. The Russian Ministry of Agriculture is reducing the extent of the subsidy for preferential agricultural loans. And it used to cover 70% of the interest rate of the central bank. Now it's going to cover 40 to 50% of that. So if the current rate is 15%, now they're only going to cover something like 7.5%. So the loan will still be, given the rates that are given right now by Russian banks, the loan will still be over 10%, maybe even over 13% in terms of annual interest. When it comes to coal, there is a big story coming out of the Kuzbas because Russian Kuzbas-based coal producers aren't getting enough gondola railway cars to export via their eastern ports. There is an agreement between Russian Railways and Kuzbas to be quota for the exports in the eastern direction, which are being done at preferential rates. However, Russian Railways is denying there are any issues, saying that it's managing to cover over 100% of its quota for the eastern ports. But this is being done only by Russian coal companies in Kuzbas, cutting their exports to western ports by 20-30%, and to the rest of Russia by a similar percentage. So Russian customers of coal aren't actually getting what they're paying for right now because of the shortage of railway cars. And in terms of losses for the Kuzbas, in terms of revenue, we're talking about 14 to 20 billion rubles per month. And we're also talking about 2 to 3 million tons of coal that hasn't been shipped per month. In terms of actual profit, we're talking about 0.8 to 1.2 billion rubles per month. And in a sector that's struggling this much, this is a considerable amount. Also, due to the stagnant prices for coal transportation and the high inflation in terms of servicing costs for Russian railway car operators, they're actually cutting their gondola railway car fleet because this is not a profitable avenue for them anymore with the low prices that are demanded by coal companies and the government. So they're even decommissioning railway cars in 2026 that are expected to have a service life until 2034. That much, the situation for them in terms of profits in this direction is that bad. When it comes to oil and gas, we have Transneft, the Russian pipeline operator, reporting its net profits for 2025, which are 21% lower at 226 billion rubles. And the reason for the decrease is the Western sanctions, which impacted the shipment of oil, and also the increase of the taxes on the company that were passed in 2025. Because the company was too profitable, they wanted it to send more money towards the budget. When it comes to construction, we have news from the center of Moscow. In Moscow city, for the first quarter of 2026, the prices for a square meter rose to over 1 million rubles. And over the last 3 years, the prices have gone up by 32%, and for the last year by 24%. If you're very rich in Russia, you're probably living well and your profits are growing, while the rest of the Russians and the Russian economy as a whole is struggling. But we have examples that the elite is doing well and is continuing to spend enormous amount of money. When it comes to the numbers of apartments in Moscow as a whole on offer, in the first quarter of 2026, they increased by 4.6% to 4,500. However, the cheaper mass segment, as they call it, is now just 32% of all the apartments on offer versus 46% in 2025. And again, I'm saying that it's the more expensive properties that are becoming more available and are built more often rather than properties for the average Russian. When it comes to demand on the secondary market in Russia's 40 largest regions, the demand grew by 26.3%, and there were 52,300 sales. And for Russia as a whole, compared to February 2025, it grew by 28.3%. However, if you are a construction company in 2026, you're looking at that and you're very worried, as you don't see anyone buying any of the new properties you're building and people focusing on the secondary market. And also we have the investment in residential and commercial real estate in the first quarter of 2026 amounted to just 99 billion rubles, which is 30% less than in 2025, the first quarter. So for 2026, the expectation is investment in commercial and residential real estate to drop by 33% or 1/3 to 650 to 700 billion rubles as the sector struggles even further when compared to 2025. When it comes to interesting data points, we start with shawarma. So sales of shawarma in Russia for the first 2 months of the year decreased by a staggering 12% when compared to 2025. The overall turnover of shawarma sales didn't decrease that much, just by 1%, because the average weighted price rose by 13% to 289 rubles. But this is again an example of things getting more expensive and Russians switching to eating at home rather than outside. We also have the demand for organized trips for the first 11 days of May, when they're going to have their big holidays, decreased by 15% when compared to 2025. Hotel bookings inside Russia are down 50% and domestic flights down 75%. The reason for this is both the conflict in the Middle East, which has closed off a lot of direct destinations for Russians to travel abroad, and also the way that the days off are grouped up in 2026 when compared to 2025, when you could more easily do a longer weekend versus how things are now. The other interesting fact is that this week we had the Eurasian Economic Commission proposing a ban on, not a ban, but an anti-dumping duty on Chinese spark plugs at 17.23% for 5 years. This is because Russian spark plug manufacturers have complained that they cannot compete with Chinese companies. However, AvtoVAZ, Russia's biggest car manufacturer, is protesting against this, saying that it will just raise its costs rather than improving the situation or causing them to buy more domestic production. Now, finally, when it comes to inflation and debt, inflation for the period from the 17th to the 23rd of March came in at 0.90%, so almost 0.2%. I don't know why the head of the central bank thinks that inflation has been solved as an issue. And for now, the inflation in March is 0.41%. The inflation since the start of the year officially is 2.78%, but it has been adjusted by close to 0.4% already. And we're not even done with March, and we're halfway through the central bank target for 2026. And I also want to point out that in the middle of the year, there's going to be an over 10% increase in the utilities tariffs and the price of natural gas for domestic use. When it comes to the debt auctions, two were held again. In the first auction, they managed to sell 23.75 billion rubles. The yield was 14.47%, so closer to what we're expecting to see and not below 14% as it happened last week. And the second auction managed to sell over 100 billion rubles with a yield of 14.7%. And again, this is closer to what we expect to see with the current interest rate. And that's it for the business news from Russia this week.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Stanimir. So, as always, we'll check in with you each week for your general update on the Russian economy. So, thanks for that. We have a lot of extra stuff I want to talk about this week. So, I'm just going to try to jump right into it. So, the first is we saw a video from the Chechen authorities of Adam Kadyrov, who was involved in a mysterious car crash, a few months ago? I don't remember how long ago it was. But the rumor was he had to be medevaced to Moscow for medical treatment. And this would have been kind of, I don't know, like a big deal for the future of Chechnya if this kid messed himself up too bad. But in the video, he looks okay. It doesn't look like there was any kind of permanent problems as a result of the accident. So, I think that's pretty much it for that. Stanimir, is there anything else? Did you pick up anything on that or no?
No, it's just that he is back, but he has been away for a long time. So that would confirm the incident. They didn't have live footage of him until recently. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. It seems like something happened, but and he was gone for a long time, but now he's back and seems okay. So next topic is I already mentioned in my previous news report that Ukraine signed an agreement with Saudi Arabia, defense partnership agreement. They also signed one with Qatar and the UAE. Zelensky made a trip this week to the Middle East or to the Gulf countries. He had personal discussions with the Ukrainian team sent to those places to basically make sure they're getting what they need, etc. So I think that overall, if I had a takeaway from all this, it seems to me like Ukraine is playing the current circumstances in global politics that aren't their doing very smartly. They see a real opportunity here to make lasting agreements with Gulf countries. And so far, they're acting on that very quickly to get things set up. And I would say they're going to great lengths to show the Gulf countries they want to help. And I think the Gulf countries aren't going to forget that. They appreciate that. And it's probably good news for Ukraine. It's pretty simple, right? Ukraine needs investment, and these guys have money to invest, and they need stuff. So it seems like a win-win. And the faster they can get the ball rolling on it, I think the better. I think that's pretty much the long and the short of it. Colby, did you have anything you wanted to say about the recent Ukrainian trips to the Middle East in terms of security agreements?
It's a positive development. I don't have any insights that aren't public to share right now on the nature of the agreements beyond what's been disclosed, but it's a positive indication. I said previously that the Gulf states obviously have considerable financial resources, and Ukraine needs more financial resources so that they can maximize their defense industrial output. So pretty much a win-win, and glad to see that these agreements are being signed.
Yeah, I think it really is that simple, which is rare in this business. So we'll just take the win. Thank you, Colby. Next, just an addendum to that topic. There was a claim by an Iranian state news agency, Fars, that they hit a warehouse containing Ukrainian drones and possibly personnel. As far as I know, the Ukrainians denied that, and that was I know they denied that, and as far as I know, there's not any additional corroboration of that. So I think for now, it's just something that a Iranian news agency said. Iranian news agencies say a lot of things, so I don't think there's any confirmation of that, unless anyone knows anything I don't. Okay, so next topic is I guess sorry, is just one other addendum to that is the U.S. Has so far more or less hand waved and or denied that Russia's helping Iran has had any effect on the current situation with Iran. Zelensky this week in a statement was pretty candid that it's not the case. He basically said, I'm paraphrasing here, but like I get an update, a security update, like every day, obviously for the war, and I just saw the Russians doing checks on these locations, and then the Iranians were shooting missiles at them. So what do you want me to tell you? They're helping the Iranians target these places. So I think the Ukrainians are being pretty candid about it. The Americans are kind of, I don't know, more or less saying it's not having an impact. But I don't know. There's been a lot of different statements about it, I'd say, from the American side. So, but it seems to me like it's pretty clear that the Russians are helping. I would assume they're helping with material support and targeting and intelligence and things like that. But so far, we haven't seen a strong response from the United States, but the Ukrainians are being pretty upfront about it, and they're taking a pretty proactive role in the whole thing. I think so far. I don't know. Anyone want to say anything about that? Yeah, it's a real rabbit hole. Russian cooperation with Iran. So we'll leave it there. The next topic is something I want to talk about with Gao a little bit. I think there's a lot of angles to this one, so I'm going to do my best to like frame it, I guess. So this week, The Atlantic had an interview with the CEO of Rheinmetall, and he made some comments about drones, specifically in Ukraine. He made some, I would say, very candid comments. He used phrases like playing with Lego. He said it's not really innovation and things like that. So he had some kind of, I think he was making a point, but I just want to lay as a groundwork the kind of tone that was being taken in the interview. He was very candid in his tone, I guess I'll put it that way. I think that generated a very strong reaction from the Ukrainians. For example, the author of the article mentioned that Skydio, the Ukrainian drone company, contacted him and basically said, housewives? Like, well, this is the era of the housewives, buddy. Something to that effect. And then Alexander Kamyshin, who is Ukraine's defense armaments minister. I don't remember, sorry, his formal title at the moment, but he's basically in charge of getting military production up to speed. He made a statement, a pretty strong statement about it. A lot of Ukrainian analysts, of course, chimed in, and I would say they took umbrage, I think is fair to say. This, I guess, culminated, I think it's kind of over now, in Rheinmetall issuing a statement that basically said, hey, listen, we really respect and admire what the Ukrainians are doing over there. We just want to say that, which I think a lot of Ukrainians took to mean something of contrition. So I think the first way to look at it is maybe a public relations exercise, right? I think that maybe the CEO of Rheinmetall could have maybe handled the situation a bit more diplomatically. That would be my general opinion. But I think overall it's good that they course corrected or said something about this. And I don't know. I think it's just a lesson that sometimes maybe being that candid is can cause a problem. But I don't know. Maybe, I mean, the CEO. So then I wanted to move from that to something more that Mr. German Aid to Ukraine can provide us a little bit more context on. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm getting that Commission was the Minister of Strategic Industries, but he resigned a while back. So now he's just on the board of the Ukrainian Railway. Sorry, yeah. So he doesn't currently hold a title in the government. So thank you, Colby, for that correction. I guess there's a lot of noise on the internet from Ukrainians about this topic, but so to that point, I wanted to talk to Gal a little bit just about the guy himself. So I think the first thing I would say about Rheinmetall, and you can obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but they've been a pretty proactive and responsible company through this whole since 2022. They've made pretty sound economic decisions to the point where they've gotten their production up. Like they're producing a lot more stuff than they were before the full-scale invasion started. I think as far as European companies go, they're maybe one of the better examples of a company that did that. And I think they did it pretty shrewdly, as far as I understand. They, bought like that production facility in Spain, and they did some other stuff. So it seems to me like, this is a serious company, and I think the CEO is a pretty serious guy. Would you say that's kind of accurate, Gao, or what would you say about it?
The CEO was what guy? What kind of guy is he?
Like he's like that Rheinmetall has been a pretty effective company, I guess, since the full-scale invasion started, and that up until now, I would say the CEO of Rheinmetall is considered a competent leader of the company. Or would you disagree?
Wow. Okay. So how do I say this without getting lifetime banned from Rheinmetall? No, I'm anyway already.
All right, yeah, I don't mean to start
it's
any
fine.
trouble here, I guess. I'm just trying to get some context for the audience, like why he would make these comments. But it seems like you have strong opinions, and you think that he is maybe not totally well-founded in what he's saying. Is that accurate?
Okay, so hear me out. First of all, in his, and I mean not necessarily Rheinmetall's defense, but in his defense, like if one really read the article, I think it's fair to say that the author of the article really had an objective, not in a positive way, towards Rheinmetall and towards Papperger. Not necessarily Papperger like directly, but Rheinmetall as a company. Because there were several topics which are really like involved in Ukraine or regarded to Ukraine, which were not discussed at all, like Skynex Skyranger, for example, like completely left out, as if I recall correctly. Just one mention of it. I think 155 ammunition was mentioned, but just the bad part, the new ammunition factory, which is just getting started, and that they're really not that automated yet, even though it was displayed as a fully autonomous 155 factory, this kind of stuff. So to me it felt like a very not really necessarily aggressive tone, but an article with a negative objective towards Rheinmetall in favor of Ukrainian drones. Not to excuse anything he said, just want to make that clear, but I kind of get why he would make more not aggressive statements but more negative statements, because he was, in my opinion, pushed towards a defensive position. Because when the author, in my opinion, the author made that very clear in the article, and when he was that clear, like face to face with him, I kind of get why he was like maybe a little bit pissed or something, and some statements made by him, like it's Ukrainian housewives with 3D printers in the kitchen and it's not innovation stuff. I mean, regardless of what one thinks of him, I don't think he has ever done any of these statements before. I mean, it doesn't mean that he never thought about it, or doesn't that he doesn't think about it, like in his private life when he's not public, but publicly has never done that, as far as I know. And so yeah, I want to cut him at least a little bit of slack here, because of the way the author portrayed it, let's put it that way. Regarding the excuse, and I'm coming to a question, don't worry. Regarding the excuse, I want to say it that
Yeah,
way.
this is all good. I
Yeah,
agree with you
Rheinmetall.
about this stuff. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. The excuse, I want to say it that way. Rheinmetall published only on X, by the way. I've checked the other company profiles, their WhatsApp profile, LinkedIn stuff. On their website, there's nothing. It's only on X because they want to probably limit the amount of people who are actually seeing that something went wrong. I don't want to say it's necessarily an excuse. I mean, I can quickly show it. They have just seen. There we have it. Sharing. So they've just saying, yeah, we have the utmost respect for the Ukrainian people's immense efforts. Blah blah blah. Every single woman and man is making an immeasurable contribution, and also said the innovative fighting highly effectively, even with limited resources. If one reads through this, they didn't say once sorry. I just want to highlight that. It's really just yeah, you're doing a great job, but we
It's a
kind of don't
LinkedIn
want to.
apology.
Yeah, it's. I mean, is it really an apology? I don't think so. So from my perspective, and I can't rank lower with Rheinmetall at this point, so I can just being honest. The press department in Rheinmetall is an absolute nightmare. Speaking from a journalistic standpoint, I think I don't get any answers anymore from them since, I don't know, 2 years now, something like this. I guess because they don't like my reporting, because I'm not just posting PR like many other magazines doing, but actually do or actually reflect what's happening with them, what they're doing as well, not only the positive but also the negative, or not only the negative but also the positive. And I guess I kind of don't like that. So I'm not getting any feedback anymore. I regularly ask them, hey, what's about this? Hey, what's about that? And it could be very positive news for them, but they just keep on ignoring me for some reason. And so, yeah, their press department is really bad. And not only now, but also back then when I had contact with them, and every few weeks ask them a question about some press release or something else, and was really a lot of I forgot to answer, and it took them like 2 weeks to get me a basic message back. And yeah,
So their PR just generally seems not the best.
yeah, it sucks. Yeah, it sucks. And to be honest, you kind of see that with this excuse. I mean, it took them more than a day. I mean, the outlash, the public outlash or backlash happened like in the early hours of yesterday, right? And it took them until today. Um, you know and it took them not only until it's German time, like 7 a.m. in the morning or something like this, but they took a few hours even today and to post this. And this is, even in my opinion, not really an apology. And you also see that they tagged like Kamishin, because he in particular made several statements publicly and quote tweeted people and stuff like that. He was really involved in this.
Yeah.
And I am kind of curious, because they posted the exact statement under 1 or 2 tweets of his, if they even apologized if he hadn't get involved in this. Yeah, just my 2 cents about the apology and about what happened in general. And regarding Rheinmetall, I mean, they have made an immense effort. Just gonna stop screen share. Sorry. They have made an immense effort in terms of increasing production and trying to lead. I mean, one very good example, as you said, is the 155 production, where they bought Expal, as you mentioned. I mean, Expal itself is not really that they necessarily expanded any production. I mean, the big chunk from the 155 production increase, which was less than 70,000 or about 70,000 in 2022, to the Colby, help me out. What do they have right now? 750,000.
I think it's about there. Sorry, I don't remember offhand. I got to pull up my my tweets about this.
Yeah, I guess they're trying to reach like 1 million or something in 2027, but something like this is right now like 750, 800,000, like something like this. But a big chunk of that was actually just buying XPy system because they had like 400,000 yearly production capacity or something. So it's a little bit bloated, but they've made great efforts. Don't want to doubt that. And Kobe, do you want to say about something?
No, I agree with everything you're saying. I think in Rheinmetall's defense, I think out of every defense firm in Europe, they're probably doing the most at trying to expand their production capacity and make investments across a very broad portfolio. And it is definitely the case that the CEO is somebody that sometimes exaggerates and will make promises that he has trouble following through on. But when I compare them to other firms in Europe, they're doing a much better job than most others, at least as far as the big firms go. I mean, smaller firms are in a different category. Obviously, the Ukrainians are an example of how a lot of startups have become very, very successful in scaling production of drones and other things. But as far as the established players on the European continent, I rate Rheinmetall above pretty much the rest of them.
Yeah, and regarding these statements, yeah, and that was also what I wanted to highlight, because my problem with Pappberger in particular, not really Rheinmetall, because in the past it appeared to me on several occasions that Rheinmetall had to do like kind of how do you say not better assessment, BDA, like management, battle management. Colby, help me out, Joseph. You know what I mean, right? Like when something bad happens and they need to take care of it, like the press department.
Yeah, damage control.
Damage control. Thank you. Yeah. So in several occasions in the past, over the years, they had to do like damage control because he made. I mean, and just look at the statements in 2022 when he said, "Yeah, we can do." Air defense production in Ukraine. We open a factory for Lynx production, for armored vehicles in general. I mean, not only Lynx, but also Panther, for example, the Panther tank. And we do 155 production, and we do this and this and this. And now 4 years later, or about 4 years later, the only thing which is open is the maintenance site. For the Western delivered vehicles. So that's just one example. So he makes a lot of promising statements, which often really just reflect the absolute maximum possible, but not the reality. And yeah, so that's my big issue with him personally. And in my opinion, at least in the people who I'm talking to, most of the experts in or other people involved in arms trades and stuff like this see it the same, that he makes a lot of bold claims. I don't know, I don't want to say he wants to just boost the market share of Rheinmetall or whatever, but yeah, at some point, in my opinion, he has to learn to just say what's actually possible, or maybe a little bit more, but not, hey, we're doing this, and in the end nothing happens at all. And yeah, and the last thing I want to say, unless you have further questions, Joseph, a possible reason he has made these kind of statements, which again, in my opinion, are very untypical for him, is that he's a little bit jealous and frustrated about what's happening with his products, because when we are just looking at drones and not nothing regarding like tanks, artillery, or whatever, just drones itself, they have delivered, or the German government has financed one Lunar NG drone system, which is like a catapult, a net for catching the drones, several UAVs, control station. So a big surveillance package, basically one of this for several million euros. in, I believe it was 2023 or so, or early 2024. But I think it was late 2023 in August or September when it was delivered or pledged, something like this. And we never had any feedback publicly, which is already not a good sign. We never saw any pictures of it or videos or anything, which is also not a really great sign. And there have never been any additional contracts as far as we know, which is, I think the last straw. So I guess that first product of Rheinmetall, drone product of Rheinmetall, is a failure in Ukraine, or at least for all we know and can assume. And the second one is the loitering munition, which is much more interesting because he was just bad mouthing Ukrainian innovations, especially FPV drones and stuff. And because Rheinmetall has for some weeks and months now a new loitering munitions own production, not the Hero license production, which is already established years ago. And apparently, both the Ukrainian and the German governments refused to fund these drones for Ukraine for months now. They've been in negotiations for about 3 months. And so far, neither the German or Ukrainian side see these drones to be worthy enough of having a small sum invested. And I'm really just talking about a small sum because Rheinmetall said they want to deliver 200 of them, which in the grand scheme of things is not a lot. I mean, these are apparently company statements, very, very capable loitering munitions, which are outperforming most of the basic FPV drones and stuff. So greater range, greater capabilities, blah, blah, blah. And therefore also have a much higher price tag. But they just want to deliver 200 of them. And it has been 3 months of negotiations, and both the Ukrainians and the Germans are saying nope. And I can't assume that it wouldn't be more than a few million euros. And I mean, Ukraine, okay, I get it. But Germany, not all of our funds are yet fully allocated. So we could have if we wanted. And so I guess a little bit of frustration from his side when somebody is coming to him and saying, "Oh, Ukrainian drones, so good, so good, so good," when all of his own drone products actually fail. Might be a bit frustration too.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think you guys have like made the points that I wanted to make, so I'll just kind of summarize it, which is from the public relations angle, there's two angles to look at this. From the public relations angle, just kind of an unmitigated disaster. This guy clearly talks a lot, and the companies had to catch up with him before. This time he maybe got a little too ahead of himself. But I think for some somewhat understandable reasons, as you guys mentioned, the author of the article maybe had a little bit of an angle or an agenda, and he managed to kind of catch the guy in a certain interpretation of what he was saying as in maybe a negative light. But that being said, it's very clear that Rheinmetall needs like better PR. So I don't know, like maybe they should hire me after this segment. We'll see. But I think the other angle to look at this is Rheinmetall is a serious company, as was pointed out. It's one of the companies in Europe that is a large-scale firm in that world that has really, I think, delivered consistently. And from that angle, I think you can understand, as Gao was saying, I think the point he was trying to make, which I've heard made in other kind of weapons production circles, is it's very difficult to scale certain technologies. And for example, can you have a Russian Ust-Luga where you get a bunch of migrant workers and unpaid interns to build drones out of fiberglass by hand? Like, yeah, but it's expensive and inefficient, right? If you're Rheinmetall, you look at these setups and you're like, this doesn't scale. And I think that's maybe where his frustration comes from, right? They're trying to scale this stuff up and they're running into issues. But that said, I think that's kind of where these companies, like for him to kind of, I think he's being a bit dismissive of the actual innovations going on in Ukraine. Number one, I don't think it's the Ukrainians' job to interpret or take what he's doing or what they're doing and provide it to him in a form that is immediately scalable. In other words, that's their job to figure out how to scale it, not the Ukrainians' job. The other issue is just, I think that Ukraine is very clearly an important test bed for what is successful and what isn't. And you can learn a lot about what you should invest in, I think, in the future based on kind of just what's going on in this context, right? Especially for Europe. So I think that I want to try to make the point that he's trying to make as best I can, which is that, some of these methods that are being used precisely because there isn't a method that we can scale cheaply and efficiently to produce this stuff in huge quantities yet. But these are, wars of survival, right, for Ukraine. And I think, Russia is obviously going all in on this too. So, they're willing to eat the cost sometimes. And then I think, this whole idea of startups, military startups, it's probably not a new thing. I'm sure Colby would tell me there's a long history of this, but it does seem like there's an increased space for that kind of company to exist in the modern security landscape. The people that can scale up production quickly for these new systems, and it's got to be increasingly difficult for a more traditional firm. These ancient defense firms that have these long-standing contracts with the state, and kind of exist to be the backbone of a national defense industry. They've got to adapt in this new age, and I think that maybe being so dismissive is not the best approach, right? So yeah, I think that's kind of my general take on it. Does anyone else have anything else they want to say about this topic?
Yeah, I just want to add that one shouldn't always also forget that, he's like Colby already said, Rheinmetall has a lot of domains, and one of their domains is, heavy vehicles, right? Armored vehicles, tracked vehicles, stuff you actually put on the ground and drive around with. And I mean, I kind of get why, or it's not uncommon, and it happens a lot with him and also a lot with other companies. So it's not only a Rheinmetall thing. I think it's the problem is, when somebody is coming to you and saying, "Yeah, drones are the future," blah blah blah. What are you supposed to say as a company which has so far failed in drones, but is fully, or not fully, but is very focused on vehicles? That vehicles are obsolete on the battlefield, and the future is drones. Of course, you have to kind of defend your position. I mean, that goes for both ways. I saw the Helsing, was it the CEO? Somebody high up from Helsing, for example, was just tweeting today in regarding to his statement, and basically said that tanks and artillery is more or less obsolete, which is of course also not true. So you get what I mean. It's kind of, the ones are saying, the drone guys, in particular Helsing, to be fair, are saying armored vehicles are obsolete or mostly obsolete, and I kind of get Rheinmetall's standpoint in saying, hey, they are not obsolete. Maybe drones are not over influenced. You know what I mean, right? Like,
Yeah.
overvalued.
I think this is a great point. Like he just got annoyed, and maybe I think you're totally right that he's dealing with all these different things, and then every once in a while some 20-year-old intern comes up to him and says, "What about drones?" And he's like, that's kind of his experience with the whole situation. And the same with they build armored vehicles, and everyone's telling him, "Oh, you should quit doing that," and he's like, "No." I mean, I think that's the general situation. They caught him in a bad mood, and he made a real PR mess for Rheinmetall.
Yeah, I mean, you have to remember that they're literally like one of the wealthiest people on Earth, saying that F-35 fighter jets are obsolete because FPV drones exist, right? So I kind of get why this, after all these years, gets under his skin. So yeah, still not, of course, not an excuse to what he said, because it's, in my opinion, absolute unprofessional and inexcusable, especially from the CEO. An experienced, very experienced CEO of probably the biggest or one of the biggest defense firms on the European continent and even in the world now. So, yeah.
Yeah, don't let him do any more interviews with the Atlantic. probably
I
no
don't think
interviews
he
for a
will.
while.
I don't think he will, to be honest. I think that's it.
Stick with
And
the
right
German
now,
publications, right? And you
I
can
mean, he's.
translate the videos for us. It'll be great.
I mean, I do from time to time, but I don't think that he will do anything with the Atlantic anytime soon. To be fair, yeah, they're probably now ranking below me. So yeah, I have to see.
To give them a call back and see if they're willing to take your offer for fair reporting.
To be fair, I mean, I know that I'm not getting any responses from them for months, and like I said, 2 years now or 1.5 years now. I know that I still regularly write them just to give them the opinion, the option, sorry, to reply to me. And yesterday, for example, I asked him for a company statement because I know that it's very unusual of him, maybe not to think that, but to say that. And yeah, they haven't gotten back to me yet, but surprise, surprise. But they also haven't gotten back to one of the biggest German media, Handelsblatt, for example, which wrote a story on the on his statements. Let's put it that way. And they also said Rheinmetall wasn't reachable for any comment. So yeah, just to give you an expression of the amazing PR work they're doing. The only thing they did was post a tweet on Twitter, and that's it. Like no comments to anyone.
Yeah, hire more PR people, rein the CEO in a bit. Rheinmetall, you're doing a good job, but PR is a mess. Okay, so yeah, that was that was a much bigger segment than I thought, but that's okay. I think it was an important context, and I don't know, it was a good discussion. It's good to catch up with these big firms sometimes and hear what they're up to. Okay, so go ahead, Colby.
I just want to make a broader point about this whole situation, which is that whenever a new military technology emerges and appears on the battlefield, there's always all sorts of predictions about how it's going to make all these different past technologies irrelevant. And this seldom ever happens. And really the only example that I can kind of think of is cavalry. The cavalry didn't even really go away. It just evolved into armor. The horses went away, but like the doctrinal role of cavalry on the battlefield still exists. It's just armored forces and armored reconnaissance. So are drones going to make everything that came before it irrelevant? No, probably not, because we've seen this story before. So they're one new tool in the toolbox. They present certain challenges, but technology will continue to evolve as it always has, and the battlefield just becomes more dynamic. But infantry isn't going away, armor isn't going away, other aircraft aren't going away. Things just continue to evolve. But whenever somebody says that X system makes Y irrelevant, it seldom works out that way.
Yeah,
and if can I
go ahead, Daniel.
No, I want to add to what Colby said, and it's very unlikely that in future human soldier will be replaced by humanoids, because this is another trend that I really don't comprehend. But yeah, putting drones and robots even in application where they would be far more overcomplicated and expensive than fielding soldier.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen, it's going to take a long time to have something as versatile as a human on the battlefield. So I think that's very true. Okay, guys, we got to talk about Ust-Luga. Yeah, let's just get into it. It was on the title card, so I feel obligated to do it. And then Daniela wanted to, of course, present some findings in his research that is in his new article at Tochnyi.info, which you can check out. If you don't want to hear me ramble about Ust-Luga, you could just read it right now. Ust-Luga is a port. It's in the St. Petersburg area, up in the Baltic.
One correction. It's okay. Leningrad Oblast, not St. Petersburg. It's Leningrad Oblast.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to give some context for just people clicking on YouTube. It's near St. Petersburg. But yes, you're correct. It's in the Leningrad Oblast. Soon to be probably renamed Leningrad. Who knows? Uh, so there were 3 strikes that occurred that the Ukrainians performed. As far as I can tell, the drones are coming from Ukraine. It's not like they're taking some fancy route and coming from the water. They're coming like up through Russia, which is already crazy. They're going 1,000 miles into Russian airspace from Ukraine, just rolling up there, and they're hitting this port. And they hit it 3 times this week. They hit it on March 25th, they hit it on March 27th, and they hit it on March 28th or 9th, overnight. And the 3rd strike is considered the most successful. They hit a fuel storage tank, caused a huge fire, and it was chaos. The 3rd attack was pretty big. So possibly, the first 2 attacks were prepping for that. I don't know, but it seemed like it was a very strategic attack. Is I guess what I'm trying to say. The strikes are part of a broader strategy that Ukraine seems to be employing because, as Stanimir pointed out, this has resulted in some real economic impacts for the Russians. They are going to they need to process ships to export oil from that port. And this has resulted in a huge slowdown in traffic. And now there are, due to the fact that the port can't process these ships quickly, there's like a buildup of around 50 vessels right now in the Baltic that are waiting on the ability to load up and head out. So this backlog is not quite a blockade of the Baltic on the Russians, but like something similar to that. It's lowered their capacity so much that there's a real impact on their ability to process cargo. In addition to that, there were some riots. There are a lot of Kazakh migrant workers who work in the port area. They're skilled workers. I couldn't tell you what the skill set is precisely, but it's made clear in various media reports that the workers it's skilled. It's not you can't just grab someone off the street and have them do this work. Our colleague, go ahead, Stanimir.
I think they would be focused on construction and welding because where they're located is the 2nd terminal that was going to be built in Ust-Luga. That was partially owned by Gazprom, by Roshim Alliance. That was supposed to be the 2nd LNG terminal in the port. It hasn't been completed because it's missing the western parts, but they should be construction workers and welders in terms of the work they're doing there.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, right? Those are important skills, like how to build stuff in the water and welding are both like high skill professions. So Russia imported these Kazakh workers to do this job. Basically, the conditions there don't sound great. Our colleague Jay geolocated the riot footage, and he said, these look a lot like Ust-Luga, which they have migrant workers there too. For lack of a better term, there's sort of cages or camps that they're kept in. There's a lot of complaints from the people who work there that the Russians are excessive in their security measures. Like there's lots of checkpoints and shakedowns, and they're not really free to move around. And that pay has been delayed a lot. Like they don't always get paid on time, or I don't know if they're getting shorted wages, but there's like general complaints about pay. And then finally, I think that the reason that this riot probably occurred is all that's already happening. But on top of that, they're now a target. I'm sure it would feel like that if you lived right next to the port of Ust-Luga right now, and they don't feel that the Russians are giving them like adequate protection, and they're not allowed to like leave. So they feel like trapped while the place is getting drones thrown at it, right? They rioted. The Russians sent in the area's SWAT police as well as the National Guard to put it down. They put it down pretty quickly, from what I understand. But I don't know, it just kind of shows that the situation is pretty serious at the port of Ust-Luga, and this is a very vital piece of infrastructure for the Russians. As I mentioned, like you can't easily replace these workers, and unlike Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, where there are immigrants that work in Russia, it's pretty easy for the Russians to pressure them because all the Russians have to say is, "Oh, you know that energy subsidy that you have would be a real shame if it were to go up, wouldn't it?" And then the Tajik government usually lays off. But Kazakhstan, I assume, isn't as easy for them to push around. They've made some public statements a little bit less friendly toward Russia than the other countries have been. They have their own oil resources. They don't depend on Russia aside from actually moving the oil through Russia sometimes to export it. They recently, as Stanimir pointed out, like barred food imports from Russia, right? So I don't know. Kazakhstan is probably not going to be happy about this, and they're not the kind of country that Russia can easily push around in Central Asia. They're the big one. So I don't know. Like it seems like an issue if they have a shortage of skilled workers in the future for that port. Like they need their skilled workers more than anything right now, and they're treating them like garbage. So that's another angle of this story. And then the final angle of this story is a bit uncomfortable, but I think it's important to just talk about these things. Multiple drones of Ukrainian origin. This is a very specific statement that has been made by all of the authorities of all the countries involved. Have been in the airspace of European countries. So in Estonia, I'll start with Latvia. A drone entered their airspace and landed in a field and crashed. In Lithuania, it crashed on a frozen lake near the border with Belarus. In Finland, this happened, I think, this morning. There were several objects detected in Finnish airspace. One crashed north of a city. And in Estonia, there was one that hit a power plant near the border. So it's, I think, a pretty serious issue. I've read all the statements from the countries. They're being very careful about how they're phrasing what they're phrasing. The first thing is they've made very clear that they're supporting Ukraine, in terms of what's going on. I think what is clearly happening, there's like two kind of theories about what's going on. The first is our colleague Andrew Perpetua, who follows all this stuff very closely. So I believe him when he says there's a trend of the Russians taking Ukrainian drones that are captured and throwing them, in these types of operations. That said, some of the statements have kind of implied that these are happening during Ukrainian attacks on Russia. So I think that's the other theory, which I think is probably happening at least some of these cases, is the Russians are GPS spoofing these drones. The drones rely on GPS to navigate, and then the Russians are able to say, oh, actually, that GPS coordinate that you're looking for is over here at this Estonian power plant. And they reroute the drone. And I think that's what's happening. I don't think anyone believes, obviously, that the Ukrainians are trying to put these drones in European airspace. So to me, that's the most logical explanation, is the Ukrainians are sending these attacks. They're very bold strategic attacks that have required years of preparation and planning, like laying the groundwork, disabling all of the systems, as Daniela's article will point out at tochnyi.info, to have these like really heavy attacks on ports like Ust-Luga, 1,000 miles, just yeet 1,000 miles into Russian territory with large scale drone attacks. That's a big deal. But there is a result, which is that some of these drones get spoofed and they get diverted off course. I don't know. So far, the country's statements have been very supportive of Ukraine. They basically said in so many words that this is all Russia's fault. If Russia would stop this invasion and stop this war, they wouldn't have this problem. and they don't really seem to be blaming Ukraine for any of this. So yeah, it's a very bold strategy. Like Ust-Luga is a very bold strategy for Ukraine. This is a result of the strategy, and so far, I think it's working. It's had a very significant economic blow on Russia, and the Europeans have been, I guess, understanding of this consequence of the Ukrainians' strategy, and the Ukrainians are continuing. So, in my personal opinion, good for them. I think that this is part of it implies. Ukraine has been striking shipping in the Mediterranean, Russian shipping, things like that. Like the gloves are coming off in certain areas, and I think Ukraine's wanted to do this stuff for a while, and they were maybe being held back by the Americans and some other people, but now it seems Ukraine is really doing strategically what they can do to get this war to end. So that's my general summary of the events. Does anyone want to add anything about Ust-Luga before we move to the next topic?
Just that it's still on fire.
Oh yeah, thank you. That's a good point. Go ahead, Stanimir.
I have to add that on the construction side, that specific site that is being constructed, it's not being constructed by nobodies in Russia. It's being constructed by, on the one hand, Arkady Rotenberg, who is a close friend of Putin, and on the other hand, Gazprom, which is run by a close friend of Putin. So yeah, they have complete support from the government, which is why they can mobilize OMON against striking workers, which is something that is not possible for a lot of Russian companies.
Yeah, it's just so classic Russia that like at one of their most important pieces of infrastructure, they have like workers that they just treat like garbage for no reason. It's highly skilled workers that they can't easily replace. So yeah, just I don't know, the whole situation. There's so many angles to the Ust-Luga stuff. So I think that's it for all that, all my topics. Thanks for bearing with me, folks. A lot happened this week. So now we wanted to move to Mr. Daniela, who has recently published an article, which you can find at Tochnyi.info, if you haven't heard me say that enough. Yeah, he wanted to come talk a little bit about his research and the content of the article. So Daniela, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for having me tonight. And the article essentially has been the result of a continuous effort in monitoring the long but also short-range strikes in occupied Ukraine, but also in Russia. And we have been collecting this type of data since start of June, at the very early stage in June, and so far we have more than 1,300 strikes on different type of targets, from oil infrastructure, ammo depot, defense industry, and also energetic infrastructure, but also, and more specifically, air defense. And in particular, air defense started to attract our attention in the last few months because we were working on, if you remember, on the strikes on oil industry, and we start to see a kind of correlation between certain number of strikes and the strikes on the oil infrastructure and the strikes on the air defense system. What we decided to do was to continue to monitor everything, but focus for a while on air defense system and trying to identify, geolocate, and categorize all the different strikes. I don't know if you want to pull the article online just to show some of the key elements that are present on the article. And one of these is a map, which is an interactive map, which the user can use to navigate through the more than 173 targets that we were able to geolocate. And overall, we identified 100 of these in Crimea. And in fact, there is a specific level of importance for what regards Crimea. Yeah, this is the menu that allows you to pull in and pull out different type of target, and then if you click on each target, you should get some information regarding what type of system has been hit. And there is also a nice animation that allows you to see the engagement rings, which is essentially the domain that radar or some batteries was covering. And you can see that is a very large number of items, which these are only those geolocated. As I said, there are more than 492 strikes against air defense in general, but of these 492, 433 are only on radar and launcher. And the others are on asset of the air defense system, like air defense command center, ammo depot, fuel depot, and so on. And yeah, the strike have been mostly done with FP2 drones, and but also FPV drones in some cases. And if you go down in the article, there is some breakdown of all the target. And the very first data that we pulled from, not from the primary sources, so from our data, but from data coming from other OSINTER, in particular a very talented OSINTER, which is AS22. He is, since the start of the war, he has been monitoring the air defense infrastructure, but more specifically the systems in different regions in order to try to establish if there was any attrition. And recently he released a tweet, a very detailed tweet. In reality, it was a thread where he shown that there was a significant loss, or at least an apparent loss of equipment from all the region in favor of Moscow and the southern region, where we have seen an increase, a substantial increase of about more than 50% of the number of battery. Sorry, not 50, is 36% in Moscow and 30% in the southern front, with a loss of, in some cases, up to 76% of the equipment in central Russia, eastern Russia, and the area of Leningrad and the Baltic fleet. This graph is a bit much below. With this idea, then we started to look at the data. We start to categorize each type of strikes, and we divided the analysis in radar and air defense system. And for the air defense system, what we kind of discovered is that there is a significant amount of material lost, because we have been able to identify more, for example, more than 56 strike against Buk, 46 on Tor, 27 on Pantsir, 22 on Tunguska, Osa, and Strela, so point defense, short range defense, but also on long range radar, for example, ACE-400, S-300, and so on. So this is essentially, it's not like a casual, the graph that I'm referring is below this. Yeah, you can go down, 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 and you will find, yes, this one, that one. This one is one of the first graph that we realized, thanks to also the contribution from Chris, who had done a magnificent job replicating the data that we provided him. And you can see that there is a very big attrition of a very good system. Buk and Tor are significantly good system. They can take down not only cruise missile, but also drone. So the idea is that, and if you put these also on the side with S-400, S-300 radar, and you can see these are a very big portion of the long-range system attacked. Essentially, any battery without a radar is just a piece of metal, pretty much useless. And these type of scenario essentially show us that Ukraine has decided to attire very methodically the air defense system, which is multi-layered, of the Russian army. And this, of course, has an effect, because it has the effect of lowering their capability of taking down and threat, but also seeing them. Because if you go down, you will see the catastrophic data that these are some video of unit that have been attacking radar and launcher. And if you go down, there is the stat for the radar. This is it. So you can see that here the first family of radar by losses is NIBO radar. Now in this category, there is not only one type. There are several types, but these are those that are considered the most expensive and the most modern for Russia. But we have also Casta radar at the same time. We have a P-18, also electronic warfare. Electronic warfare, I want to say that is very peculiar. If at some point you go back to in the map, or anyone want to check, it's just in the region of Belgorod. So if you go there and you see EW, it's just Belgorod region. It's only there. So this is a very, very much something that happened in that region, just to open something there, because it's done only there, or at least this is those that we were able to geolocate. This is also a very important point to make. But in general, if you look at the stat, you see 58 NIBO radar destroyed. It is essentially a very big blow, especially if you consider that we start to measure these from June. And in terms of, to give you an idea, the type of radar that they took down are the Nebo U 24, Nebo M 18, Nebo SVU 13, and in particular the Nebo M is a modulated three-band system, which normally is used to detect very low cross-section target. So this means that there is a very severe attrition of the capability of the Russian armed forces to see and to have situational awareness of the airspace. And this, of course, is not completely blinding, but if continue at this rate, and I can tell you, we have this subgroup inside Tochnyi that works on this. I started to don't reply to that chat because I had to concentrate on publishing these. I can already tell you that the situation is even worse than these data. So many people talk about snowball effect. I'm not sure if a snowball effect will occur, but for sure we have seen a further acceleration of this type of strike. And the reason is simple. The more system you take down, the less protected the front is, and also more type of aggressive posture will be posed by the Ukrainian armed forces, but also of the Air Force, which at the moment has been playing a very defensive role with very calibrated action. I wouldn't be surprised if the effect of this campaign, which has been at the moment a success for the amount of resources needed, and this is why this is also a very important lesson for the West, because Russia started this war with an incredible inventory of items. We can argue that the quality is not as good as the US, as us, but still they lost an enormous amount of infrastructure in specific region occupied Ukraine, in particular Crimea, and also in the region closer to Rostov-on-Don and Belgorod. Here you are looking at a table that show essentially the attacks only in Crimea and what type of target has been taken down. And Crimea have seen more attack than any other region. And there are different reasons why this is a thing. And one potentially is the fact that we don't have all the geolocated data, so maybe there are more in other areas, which we can put on our bar chart, but we cannot locate on the map. But there is also a strong feeling that Ukraine is trying to attire and render very difficult to defend Crimea, because by impeding the presence of air defense system, or like pervasive presence of air defense system, you can start to have more control of the Black Sea, and you can start to fly mission closer and closer to the front line. And so also those Storm Shadow and other missiles that are available, or guided munition that are available to Ukraine, they can start to hit further and further. And an example of these, a very perfect example, is the strike that hit the the electronic plant in Russia a few weeks ago. I always forget, Kremny L, and this was a very much effect of this type of campaign, because arrived on the peak of the strikes on the air defense system and on the radar. And after this, we haven't seen a stop. Instead, we have seen an acceleration. You were discussing about this. I've discussed about this also with Jonathan from ATP geopolitics, and there is definitely a new direction or an avenue of attack through Berdyansk, going to St. Petersburg and that area. And so the point of this research is essentially double. The first one is to demonstrate that an asymmetrical campaign conducted with low-cost munition, but also precision munition in certain cases, has a dramatic effect if done properly. Even an air defense with a significant inventory doesn't have always a very good outcome. We can argue that Russia has a very big issues with training and in general with the capacity and capabilities and training, but the repetition of the strike and the amount of losses are essentially also showing an effectiveness of the technique used by Ukraine. And on the second point of view is that Europe has to wake up, also in light of what is happening in Iran at the moment, because this type of asymmetric situation can happen also with a peer adversary, which can leverage on very large and very systematic production of certain equipment. So, for example, just to give you an example of a system that has been pretty much ineffective to do what it should do, is Pantsir. Pantsir has been hit most of the time, not 99%, but close to that, while was acting as an escort or a protection for S-300, S-400. And every time this happened, essentially, these were essentially destroyed before by a low-cost drone, and then a more expensive one was launched against the S-300, S-400 radar or launcher without any regards. So this to show you that it's very important, and on this Colby is right when he says that there is no reason, and I don't understand why we are not buying more Skynex and more gun-based system when we have very good one, because these type of threat to high value target like an air defense system or like an hangar or an airfield is going to be something that it will be operational reality even in a war with Russia. So I think it's very important to study these numbers, keep an eye on these phenomena, because of course this is going to not redefine but change how we operate also forward operation bases, how we man and protect our airfield abroad or at home, because you can have another country, adversary country, that infiltrate or pay someone to just slam a drone inside an engine, even without a warhead. For example, a larger engine for an air tanker, you slam an FPV drone inside, you are for sure grounded for weeks. So this is to say that we needed to change a little bit the habit against this type of threat, because I don't see I see movement, but it's very slow. That was my point. And yeah, and I think it's everything. I want to mention one important thing. This article has not been done only by me. There is another couple of people behind that, and one of them is Atin Noctua, who worked essentially on the part regarding the organization of the Russian army in particular the air defense forces, and he gave a very a significant amount of input in terms of knowledge about the systems, which honestly I didn't have at the time. So very big shout out to Atin Noctua for his work, and I hope we can probably in the next few months, or maybe in the next months, give an update on the current situation. Will be just an update, so probably a thread. Thank you. If there is any question.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Daniel. I think it's a really important topic, this issue of cumulative effects, right? Like we have these people counting equipment losses, and obviously that's like super important. That's like the foundation of all this data. But it's harder to measure cumulative effects of all this, and I think it's like an interesting endeavor and very well researched. So, good job to you and the team, and everyone, of course, can access the article at Tochnyi.info. We got the link in the chat because we're professional like that. Okay, so I think there's several questions, just a couple. So the first question is for Stanimir. Why did LNG in Ust-Luga, Primorsk, Vysotsk, and I'm not going to try to pronounce the last one, not being targeted yet? Do you think that Europe has asked them to preserve those?
Well, first on the last one, it should be Bolshoi Bor, but maybe if I'm pronouncing it in the Bulgarian way rather than the Russian. Sorry for that. We have the LNG terminal in Ust-Luga and the LNG plant and the gas processing plant in Ust-Luga hit. So I don't think there's an agreement there with Europe so far in terms of that one. For Primorsk, maybe they haven't gotten to it because they've been focusing more on Ust-Luga, though they have continued hitting Primorsk. It is still on fire too. When it comes to Vysotsk and Bolshoi Bor, I think those are smaller facilities. One of them has only one berth. The second one has two berths, I'm thinking, from last checking the maps. So I don't think they've gotten to them, but they will probably also be on the chopping block if Ukraine manages to take out Primorsk and Ust-Luga. I don't think there is a European agreement for that, from what we've seen, with the way Ust-Luga has continued to be hit.
Ukraine is not taking anything off the table.
Yep. I mean, I'm certainly not privy to any special information, but I do cover the strikes every week. It seems like they're not holding back. So thanks for the question. Next question is, do the Russians still use S-400, S-300 for ground strikes? It's funny you mentioned that. We discussed this pretty recently. So I think that means the answer is yes. This is a capability that is designed into the system. But the missile itself isn't super optimal for ground strikes, but it can be used for that, and the Russians are still doing it. Does anyone want to correct any of that or add anything?
No, honestly not, and I agree 100%. They're still using.
Yeah, so they're still doing it. It's questionable strategy, but they use what they got. So the next question is Russia also attacking air defense, and is it also as successful as Ukraine? And if not, how is it possible that Ukraine is more successful in that area? Daniela.
Well, I think one of the reasons why they are so successful is the situation awareness. And I think I didn't mention this before, but I think by looking at the videos, looking at the data, and looking at the methodology of the strikes, you can understand that Ukraine has a very, very, very accurate knowledge of where these units are. Why am I am confident when I say this? Because I've seen more than in order to verify all of these videos, I watched most of them, nearly all of them, and I also start to look at behavior during the strike, how long it took to the drone. Of course, there is a cut because they allow you to see what they want. But you start to see that many times these type of attacks happen during a movement. For example, a lot of S300 or F400, S400 were, because they are mobile, in the sense they needed to set up. So once set up, they are static. Pretty much, they stay where they are if they attacked. But they can move, so they can relocate, and the Russian relocates. But most of these attacks happen when they were on the move. You can see literally the people jumping on the track because they are moving out, and they were hit where they are more vulnerable, of course. And this is just to give you an example. For a book or Tor is a particular because Tor has this antenna that needs to be open in order to scan and be operative. And many times, they were not aware of being observed, and then they were hit. So I think there are therefore two components on this. The first is the situational awareness. Ukraine has deployed a significant big network of ISR drones that are capable of tracking and listening and intercepting signal intelligence, so use of signal intelligence, reconnaissance, and so on. But there is also a component of partisanship because a lot of this stuff happened behind the front line, quite far away. So I'm quite sure that Ukraine has a network of saboteurs and partisan that can inform them, oh, look, in this location, you may find this. Then you send a drone, you identify them, and then it's a matter of time to hitting them. The Russians on their side do not have this luxury, but they try, and sometimes they succeed mostly on infrastructure because they have essentially they know, or for example, happen few times, but happen that the Russians have hit large gathering of officers, of soldiers being just initiated to be soldiers. So this ceremony that now are nearly banned, but a few months ago, even a year ago, you remember that they were able with Iskander to hit these buildings. Why? Because there was someone that underpayment sold that information. So of course the Russians are able, and I'm sure the Russians have been probably hitting some of the asset in air defense system for Ukraine. But the big difference is that Ukraine is also developing an enormous net of decoys, things that we didn't see very much in on the other side. So they are deploying as well, but not at the same scale. So I think overall, Ukraine has been better in situational awareness for this particular mission because I want to also add another little layer of information. This is an operation that has nothing to do with the normal operation on the front line. This is not a tactical operation. This is a strategic operation, at the most an operational strategy. So they are using resources inside their SBU, GUR, and special forces to attire specific things to enable other things to happen. So I know that there are also people say, well, why they are not hitting with the same level of accuracy and relentless, for example, logistic? Because the front line is not moving very much in the end. But if you can destroy or severely attire their air defense system, then you have an edge to do more. So I think there is the reason is because Ukraine is really now getting momentum in this type of operation. And thanks to this operation, is starting to explore more ways on how they can project power over Russia. I hope that I explain all the point.
I remember maybe like a year or two ago, I want to say maybe closer to 2 years ago, like there was like a lot of medium-sized reconnaissance drones from Russia getting like video of Ukrainian air defense systems. And I remember at the time, like the kind of the chatter on the server was like, man, they should not be able to get this far into Ukraine. That's bad. But then eventually the Ukrainians managed to deal with the problem, and we don't see these like medium-sized reconnaissance drones. I think they were Garans, but getting as far into Ukraine. I'm sure it still happens, but I think that was another key factor, is getting these reconnaissance drones dealt with. So, yep, good question. Huge topic. Thank you for your question. So the next question is, do we know if you can capture a drone mid-flight and insert new coordinates to change the flight path? So there's probably other people who will comment on this, but I'll just say quickly, there's a couple of different ways that the drones are actually controlled, and how they communicate, I guess, with their how they determine their position, I guess you would say. And through traditional GPS systems, there is a way to capture it and tell it to go to a different place. You do that by GPS spoofing, which is a technology the Russians have and use frequently. And it basically just says, oh, the coordinate you think is here is actually over here. And then the drone goes, oh, okay. And it goes over there. But there's other methods, right? We've seen Starlink terminals on them. We've seen they use SIM cards, like Russian or Ukrainian SIM cards sometimes. So there's like other ways to do it that aren't as reliant on GPS spoofing. But I assume there are still ways to capture and redirect those using. You could maybe like match the frequency that they're getting communications and just say, "Hey, I'm that guy," and tell them things, and they'll go, "Oh, okay." But I'm not a huge expert in that area. Does anyone want to add anything in terms of my layman summary? No, hopefully I'm not miseducating the public on drones, but I think that's...
No, I think that covers it. I mean, it depends on how the guidance system works. As you said, if it's GPS guided, it can be vulnerable to spoofing if the GPS coding is not sophisticated enough to defend against those spoofing attacks. If it's a different kind of guidance system, then I mean, it just really depends. Obviously, something that's got a fiber optic control, not really possible to take control of it or interfere with the control, because it's literally a physical connection. So unless you actually physically sever the fiber optic, in which case the drone would just lose connection, unless it had some sort of automatic target recognition, autonomous capabilities on top of that. Then so I think that's a good basic explanation.
Yeah, thanks, Colby. It's just good to get some backup to make sure I'm not completely off base. Okay, and then next question is, if Ukraine uses decoys, how do they know that incoming Russian missiles is going to go after the decoy and not like a real thing, a real target? And like, does Ukraine have to waste interceptors just on every missile?
No.
Man. Oh, go ahead. Yeah,
no.
Colby.
I mean, Ukraine knows where they've placed their decoys, and so the decoys are going to most likely be deployed fairly far away from the actual air defense assets themselves, and they're going to be deployed outside of the defended area as well, and they won't be on the defended asset list. So when your radar detects the incoming threat and it's making determinations about the trajectory of that threat, assuming it's a ballistic threat. If it's a non-ballistic threat, then you don't really know exactly where it's going to go. But for a ballistic threat, you have a general idea about where that threat is going to impact, and so you make a determination: is this likely to impact something that's in the defended area or on the defended asset list? And then you'll make a determination about whether it needs to be intercepted, or you can just let it impact because you believe it's going to impact just an unoccupied area, or it's going to strike something that is not worthy of engaging the threat to destroy it, because it's not a valued asset that the missile might strike.
Yeah, I think like concealment and mobility is like an art. It's extremely important in this new age of warfare, where a lot of these positions and locations are pretty easily determined by the tools that the different armies have, and they have these standoff capabilities that can hit it. So yeah, the Ukrainians are real experts at this art. And I'm sure there were many hard-won lessons in terms of how they did it, but I think, as you said, they set it up so they can make determinations, and I'm sure they put a lot of thought into how they where they put the decoys and where they put the real stuff. And it's a real challenge, I would say, for modern militaries, is like how to properly conceal and keep active your defense assets, because they're so important. As Daniela's article points out, like if you start losing this stuff, then you start facing increasingly hostile threats to your own airspace, and you don't have the tools to deal with them, and then the problem kind of snowballs or spirals. Great question. I think that's all the questions, Mr. Gao. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it certainly was the last one.
Okay, well, chat, thank you for your questions. So we always appreciate that. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up here. It was a great broadcast. Really enjoyed talking through all this stuff with you guys. A lot happened this week. It's tough to keep track of it all, but I think we did our best to comprehensively cover what was going on. Thanks to our panel for answering all the questions for Chad, and for contributing all their expertise and knowledge. They know these guys are a lot smarter than me, so I do my best to aggregate the news, but they know stuff, as has been hopefully demonstrated this week. Thanks to the panel, which Mr. Gao makes me say includes me. I have to thank myself, and he's the executive producer, so I have to. Thanks to chat. We appreciate you guys. Thanks to everyone watching the broadcast after the fact. We know not everyone can make it to the live. Shout out to the Twitter people. We appreciate you. Come check us out on YouTube. I feel like YouTube's a bit more, we're able to communicate with you guys better than Twitter. So we prefer chat questions here. We're still happy to be on Twitter again and providing content for you guys. So I think that wraps it up for us this week. We'll see everyone next week, 2100 Kyiv time. Remember, daylight savings in Europe happened this week, so I think that 2100 Kyiv time is now a little earlier for the rest of the world. Keep that in mind next week, like I didn't this week. And showed up to the meeting late. We'll see everyone 2100 Kyiv time next Sunday. Slava Ukraini.
Slava.
On behalf of the brave.